All right. Hello to everybody that is tuning in with us with the Coach's Corner for another Friday night episode. As our guests are getting settled, I'm just going to say a couple words of housekeeping. As you are watching, feel free to ask questions. Just drop it in the chat box. I'll keep an eye on it. We will try to get everything answered. If we don't have time to get everything answered, go ahead and head on over to the Coach's Corner. They're amazing there, and they'll be sure to get to all of your burning questions that we couldn't get to tonight. So with that being said, I am going to pass this off to His Grace Duke Sean.
Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks again for joining us for the Coach's Corner. We have another episode tonight on another elephant in the room conversation that we do periodically. This one is related to previous one that we did, talking about, we talked about calibration previously. Tonight's kind of an extension of that topic on some of the social dynamics that can happen on the list field that can cause some awkward and uncomfortable moments, especially for unbelted fighters when you're dealing with power dynamics of knights and royal peers, or even the marshals, and a variety of social circumstances where it can be uncomfortable to advocate for yourself and to keep from having a problem. One of the things we did want to mention is that we are going to be talking about these things in terms of how they happen in the fighting field, but make no mistake, a lot of these topics we're going to talk about happen off the field as well. And the solutions are going to be similar in those circumstances as well. So we're really not kind of covering it from that perspective, but we're not ignorant to the fact that these things happen broadly throughout the society. We're just going to be talking about some ways that these show up on the fighting field. We're just kind of framing it that way. So tonight we have to have with us, we have some of our regular coaches, Duke Eliahu, His Grace Thorfinn, and we have a special guest to us tonight. We have Duke Ronald Wilmot from the East Kingdom, and Duke Valharic, who's from abroad, from parts everywhere. Both of these guys have traveled broadly throughout the SCA and have seen these circumstances come up in many different kingdoms for many, many years, and both have some good experience and some insight on how they approach these things. So Ronald, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. I'm Duke Ronald. I'm originally from the West Kingdom. I moved to the East 36 years ago last week. And this is a subject very near and dear to me. Kind of the first part of this I'd like to go into is describing a type of person that I believe does easily more damage than people who just shrug off shots. What I'm talking about are people who are sometimes even like local marshals, or they're just a fighter in your group, that cripple the progress of the local fight practice. And I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I had a fighter that came to me pretty much in tears because his local marshal was getting in the way of his getting authorized. He kept putting condition after condition after condition on it and never letting him do it. How we handled it in that case is that we actually took him to a practice, worked with him, found he was perfectly safe, authorized him, and then we spoke to the regional marshal to investigate the situation. I don't know what came of it, but the marshal since has left the SCA, and the person who came to me practically in tears is now a Duke. It saddens me to think how many people we have lost over the years due to this kind of thing. What I'm talking about is kind of what you think of in the mundane world as a middle management wannabe. This is the kind of person that will only correct you in front of management. This is the kind of person that will take credit for your work. This is the kind of person that will put conditions on things that don't actually exist to discourage other people's growth. This is either out of the possibility that person may surpass them someday, or it may be just out of spite. There's somebody who hasn't been particularly successful in the SCA, so they're trying to keep others around them down. If you run into this kind of person in your SCA travels and they're doing it to you, most of the time it's not going to do much good to try and talk to them directly. Talk to a local member of the chivalry you trust. Talk to your regional or principality marshal. There are ways to handle this, and that person may not even realize that they're doing this. They may just think this is just the way things are done. Unfortunately, ignorance sometimes gets passed down from generation to generation in this group. Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to get into this a lot more in detail.
Okay.
But that's some of the stuff we're talking about. We got a whole list of these things that Ron's talking about, that we're gonna get to a little bit more. So I want to introduce Valharic. Val, if you want to just give us a brief introduction of what where you're at. Can I hear you? Can't hear you. You're muted. Welcome to the party.
Hey, is that better?
It's not a Zoom
Great.
session if somebody's not muted.
All right. Well, I'm Duke Valharic. I've had the privilege and honor to reign in the Middle and Atlantia. I've lived abroad due to my time in the military, and I'm really glad to be here tonight. I think we have some important topics, and if we can all come away with this with more understanding, we'll be a better society. So thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for having us. So Thorfinn's going to cover for us a little bit of a recap of last week's or the episode we had, the last elephant in the room we had, to kind of give us some context of how we got to this particular episode. So Thorfinn, want to cover that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the things we talked about were like on the field, like blow calibration issues and things like that. And we did go over towards the end of the show things about the recourse that you can do to help advocate for yourself, and also how to find people to talk to. There is a procedure to do all these things, guys, and to feel free to actually take advantage of those things. And so with that, I think that, and also we talked about the fact that, there is action happening. People are getting sanctioned or having, like, say, their fighter cards taken away by the marshalate, things like that. So there is actual progress, and we are all working together to try and to maintain that going forward. Speaking about the topic that we were just on with Duke Ronald started, I kind of call this gatekeeping, right? This idea that what you're trying to do is you're trying to stop other people's growth inside of the society by, I think oftentimes out of fear that it's going to somehow devalue you. And I see this happen kind of a lot. I've seen it happen on the field. I've seen it happen in simple things like, a local seneschal or someone like that. And so there is, you guys feel free to go to someone who's above them and look for that person. If it's on the field, go talk to the marshal. If it's the marshal, talk to your local baron or prince, and heaven forbid you have to go all the way to the crown, but there is a conduit for you to talk to people to kind of make sure that these things are taken care of for you. Okay. So these people are just power trippers, and especially they feel that this power is theirs, but there's no real power. This is a hobby that we all have. That guy doesn't actually control anything, right? So don't be afraid of these people that are just abusing their station. And that's what I'm going to leave that off with. Okay.
Yeah, and along those lines, as Ronald was saying, there's this perception of power where a lot of these problems come from. Wherein, as Ron was saying, it's like the person that was being held up, and being assigned all these other things. He's gone on to some prominence in our society, and the marshal at the time that was trying to hold this person back doesn't even play anymore. Is that right, Ron?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's that's kind of that middle management wannabe types that we're looking at, and that's one of the things we're talking about. Some of the other things we're going to be going over is the magic sword or magic helmet syndrome, abusive fighters, valuing only natural talent, devaluing a fighter's achievements, which is kind of related to that as well, from what Thorfinn was saying. Social jeopardy and solutions, and then talking about some of the sanctions that have been applied there. So, Ron, do you want to kind of maybe wrap us up on the middle management part there?
Sure. I'm sorry about jumping the gun a little bit on that, but this is something I've encountered innumerable times in my career, is that people that either didn't get the success that they felt they should have had in the SCA, or people that felt that for some reason being overlooked. Sometimes they kind of were like, well, if I'm not going to succeed, well, no one around me is going to succeed either. And they're very destructive, dangerous people to have around. And unfortunately, they're all too common in this group. Along with the other example I gave, I mean, when I was up and coming, there were numerous times I was told, well, you can't marshal at practice because you don't have a marshal's warrant, or I was told that I wasn't allowed to do certain things because I didn't have, certain cookies like a marshal's warrant or a squire's belt or whatever. And that's very damaging. And, when someone's treated like that enough, they're either going to leave, or they're going to become embittered and they're going to get a chip on their shoulder. And we don't want either of those things to happen. We want people to have a nice experience in this group, and we want them to succeed. That's what part of our job description is as knights, is to help people succeed. And it should be part of the job description of every SCA person, is to help other people succeed. So, but unfortunately, going to that person in most cases isn't going to help for the person being, at the other end of it. So as you all said, we need to encourage people to not be afraid to go to a local member of the chivalry, especially when they trust, because there's a perception out there that all of us knights get along. And that's what I thought when I was a kid, was that, if you tick off one knight, you tick them all off. And it was only after I started going to knights councils as a knight where I realized, wow, that's total. I had that one totally wrong. So yeah, that's that's kind of what I would say about the subject. I'll pass it on to, I think Eliahu wanted to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, I have just one comment, that you're correct that it may do no good to talk to that person directly. However, you should talk to that person first. That if you don't talk to the person and you're assuming that there's a problem, that's a problem too. It's a lot of the solutions to all of these problems have to do with communication, better communication. Well, it starts with trying to communicate with the person who you think you may have a problem with, to confirm that there's some difference, or is a problem, or there isn't a problem. There's just a misunderstanding or miscommunication. If that doesn't work, then you move on to the next level.
The grievance procedure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the grievance procedure, as has been outlined by the SCA. It's harder to find than it used to be, but it always was: go to the person you think you have a problem with. If you can't do that, then you may need a mediator, or you may need to go to the next level, and so on.
All right. So Val, again with the mute.
Yeah, I'm having trouble. Sorry.
That's all right.
Are we good?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm gonna move on to a different topic, and that's the magic sword or the magic helmet syndrome. And this is particularly frustrating to me, is when you meet an individual whose calibration is so varied from what they give to what they take and what they expect from you, as opposed to what they think that they're throwing. And again, the best way to deal with this situation is, again, through communication. And if you can't get anywhere with that individual, then you need to involve a marshal. But usually a good way to start is, if you're having a disconnect about calibration, is to ask them to throw a telling blow to you, and then you throw a telling blow to them, and then you have a baseline. And when the combat continues and those things don't match up, you can go back to, you're hitting significantly harder than you did when we calibrated. You're hitting significantly lighter than we did when you calibrated, and then adjust accordingly. You know, everything's a conversation, and the more information and the more willing you are to reach out and find that middle ground, the better.
Yep. Well, and I think it's important to point out here too. We talked about the grievance procedure, which had been in place for a long time, and there had recently been a change to at the corporate level to how these things are brought up. One of the issues with the grievance procedure as it was before is you first talk to the person that you have a problem with. That again, kind of along the same conversation we're having, that was kind of determined to be sort of you having to confront your abuser, as it were. So if you're having a problem with power dynamics, and you're supposed to go talk to the person that has power over you or is in a position of power over you, that can cause people to not say anything because they feel like they don't. And a couple of years ago, the SCA at the corporate level updated the bullying and harassment policy, and basically made it so that you don't have to talk to the person directly. If you report a problem to one of the local officers, like a seneschal or a night marshal or whatever, they are now required to run that up the flagpole. They're required to talk to the kingdom officers in charge of that, so that you don't have to necessarily go directly to that person. So that is a change that is somewhat recent to the grievance procedure and how we get things solved. And again, as we'd mentioned before, that there are people that have been sanctioned. The corporation is trying to find better ways to allow people to address these things, and that's one of those things that you've done. So you don't necessarily have to talk to the person, but at some point, if you are going to say that there is a problem with an individual, whoever you end up reporting that to, if you are not going to come forward at some point and speak for yourself and say that I have a problem, you can't just report a problem and have somebody be sanctioned without being able to step up and say what that problem is. So it does take some work, but there are avenues that don't require you to face somebody who you feel you have an inequality in the power dynamic. So
I'd like to just
Yeah, go
clarify.
ahead.
I agree with you, and I think this is an important change in what had been the grievance procedure. What I said about talking to the person first, there's an assumption that that's possible, that it's not, and it's not always possible. That wasn't clarified in the old grievance procedure. It's much better clarified now. Sometimes that face-to-face confrontation or communication, conversation isn't possible because of that power imbalance. If it is possible to do so, that's the place to start. But it isn't always possible. And then you should move on to reporting it and do it that way. So I apologize for not being clear before.
Oh, that's quite right. And again, that was a recent change in the last couple of years. Thorfinn, do you have anything else on the magic sword, magic helmet concepts?
Yeah. So
yes, I do.
Right. That's my favorite thing to say. Of course I do.
I gotta say, first of all,
I'd like to say that I'm seeing two different types of things in our notes that we were looking at, and one of them is the shot salesman. And the shot salesman's a guy who is going to hit you maybe light and then go into a long discussion calling out your personal, chivalry on your blow calibration, instead of just having an open line of communication and trusting you and allowing it to go forward from there. So the shot salesman, they're the guy that is oftentimes they're throwing junk at you, and then they're expecting you to take the blow when they're not really going to be taking it themselves for that same type of a situation. The other one is social calibration, and social calibration is a real problem. I've seen it from new fighters all the way up to peers. And what social calibration is that they have a different calibration level for each situation. So I've seen fighters when they're fighting, say, their peers. So let's say an unbelted fighter is fighting their peers. They have a much higher calibration than when they're fighting knights and royal peers because they're trying to impress them, right? And so they're trying to win fights against their peers and show humility, I think, against what they are perceiving as their superiors. And this is a problem that people really should be, it causes a lot of issue on the field. And when you see this, guys, again, talk to the person. And there's a lot of things that can happen here. I've seen, for instance, fighters have to have someone watch them at practice to make sure that they were being okay, or all the way to even having their fighter card taken away. And so again, by using the kind of the grievance procedure we talked about, and of course going through all the steps of talking to the trusted peers that and local marshalate, you should be able to hopefully navigate through these things. And it is something that it's systemic everywhere, in every kingdom I've been to. So there you go. That's my part on that.
Yeah. Ron, did you have anything else on this one?
I think that Eliahu, I think that the other guys covered it pretty well. But I've often said that somebody who's got a different calibration level for themselves and for their opponent, that to me is worse cheating by far than somebody who takes an excessively hard shot. Because what you're doing is you're basically putting my honor on the chopping block because you're gaming the system. It's like the other way I put it is, if you can't kill yourself with your own shots, then you've got a problem. Like if you hit yourself with a shot and you're not going to take it, then you're the problem. But this has been a problem that I've heard very few people talk about. And I've literally had people come up to me and tell me that they use the lightest sword they possibly can, throw as many shots as they possibly can at their opponent to embarrass them to death. That's just, what glory and honor is there in that? But, that's all I have to add to it.
Yeah. So one of the next subjects that we have there is abusive fighters. These are the fighters who will basically become abusive and throw a fit whenever anything doesn't go their way. And they do this mostly to somebody of a lesser rank. Valharic, you want to start us off on that one?
The abusive fighter is really interesting because I think that, again, this is just my opinion, is that they really need attention that they're not getting somewhere. So if it becomes chronic in your fight, and everything is a situation where it's a hold and a blow up, honestly, there is one thing that we all have at our ability, and we never lose honor for it. If you have an individual like that and you can't get anywhere through the fight, just withdraw from the list. You don't look bad. Just say, you know what? I think it's cool. I'm gonna chill out, and you're having a bad day. Maybe I'm having a bad day. This doesn't need to go on. You don't have to stay in a bad situation, and you don't have to see it through to the end, and you don't have to feel like if you do that you're the bad guy.
Yeah. All right, Eli. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, there we go. One of the things that I was taught when I was a squire was you gain more renown by losing well than you ever do by winning badly. And I think that's important, but there are some people who don't understand that. And even the idea of how I was first taught to fight, which in those days was putting you in armor and hitting you until you figured out how not to get hit. We would consider that abusive training now. it's not teaching, it's not coaching, it's not any of the things that we've been talking about for the past year in coaching and how to do that. So there are people who will use their we've seen it, I've seen it at practices where somebody takes the new person out, and or somebody just they know of lesser skill, and just keeps hitting them. They aren't teaching them, they aren't helping them. They're making it about them rather than about the other person. And that's one of the aspects of how nice abuse, when the fighting experience, which is a conversation, whether there are words or not, it's a conversation between two people, when it's only about the other person, when the only joy in fighting somebody is that someone's having is in beating the other person. So the solution to that can sometimes be not fighting them. And that can be a solution. And I fought someone it was a crown tournament, and my opponent was throwing tantrums over every bad shot he threw. And it wasn't physical abuse, but it was bad conduct. And I simply resigned the fight, because I had, by continuing in it, I had too much to lose. So my communication there was not with him, it was with the marshals. And ultimately that's how I dealt with it. So it's hard to recognize when you're in the situation, and it's hard to recognize when you're simply observing the situation. But I would watch for people who always pick people of lesser skill to fight, whether it's a practice or pickups or any kind of situation, and don't adjust what they're doing in a teaching situation, either for lack of skill or for lack of interest in doing so.
I'll touch on a situation that happened with me. It kind of ties into the last couple of subjects here. Talking about those people who are going to use your own honor against you, as Ronald was saying. I had always taught my guys for the longest time that if somebody questions your calibration or questions your honor, to me that means that winning the fight means more to them than it means to me. And I will always I will always yield the field in those circumstances, because I am not going to have my honor questioned. I'm not going to have my calibration questioned. I'm not going to have anybody have any room to say that the only reason that I won is because I was going to blow off a shot. And yeah, I mean, I think I think telling somebody that well, if you don't take this, it's going to look really bad. I think that's a shitty way to win a fight. But I can say that I've never won a list under those circumstances, and I will always defer to that and maintain my honor as best as possible. And yeah, it's a shitty thing to happen, but that's kind of what we talk about when we say abusive fighters or people that are gaming this system. I mean, because ours is an honor-based system, and if the honor isn't there, then the whole thing falls apart. And we all have to have faith and trust in each other that we're all doing our best to call these blows as correctly as possible. But it is a system that that kind of lends itself or is open to that sort of gaming. And quite frankly, I think there's a lot less of it now than there was even 30 years ago. There's less of it, but it's a system that we have, and it is kind of open to that. So anybody else have any final thoughts on this one? Oh, there you go, Thorfinn.
Yeah, so I've run into this particular thing several times in my career. One was there was a very well-established Duke here in my kingdom who was known to be quite a bully. And this is what we're really talking about, is being a bully. The type of people that take advantage of the weak, right? And he would purposely knock people down, or at practice in front of his kind of cronies, he would hit a guy, or especially a newer fighter, and then say, "Oh, sorry, that was flat," and then kind of look to his cronies to support that behavior, right? And I always thought this was just abhorrent. I hated this whole behavior. And then we even had a guy who was an unbelted guy in my local practice who he relished picking like new people, like you said, and beating them up, or especially lady fighters. That was like his favorite thing to do, right? Really awful. And this is a fragile ego, is what's really what we're looking at here. The person with a fragile ego, and that leads to the dark side, right? Like their fear leads to them performing poorly and doing things that are just really just not part of what we are even trying to achieve in our group. And so, they can be very difficult to deal with. And sometimes, like I said, like really well-established people can do this. But don't be afraid to call them out on it. And if you have to, again, go to people that have the power to be equal with them in order to do that. That's the worst thing we can encounter in any group. Is the way to chase people away is to have bullies in it, and I hate them. So I'm the guy who's definitely going to be up against the bullies every time. Come to me for sure. All right, but that also, I wanted to say that something that Valharic said, I totally agreed with. That if there's no honor to be gained in fighting someone, and you can only lose your honor through basically being like them, then it's okay to yield the fight and walk away. Thus, maintaining your honor is huge, right? That's the currency you spend as a fighter on the field. If you fail to do that, you have no value. You will lose value as a recognized fighter by your behavior. So don't be afraid to say, sometimes it's okay to just say, I cannot achieve this fight, and just be done, right? And so that being said, guys, that's my part.
Ronald.
Yeah, this is a subject that's also very near and dear to me. I've seen and experienced this over the years. An aspect of abusive fighters are ones that get overly dramatic and abusive when a fighter makes a mistake, especially when they perceive as being below them on the food chain. By that I mean, if you're fighting someone and they accidentally clip you in the knee, hit you in the hand, make whatever mistake they make, and the fighter loses it on them. I mean, and I've seen this happen. And I tend not to wear my white belt at practices a lot. And a number of years ago, I was at a practice and there was an unfamiliar fighter there. He was visiting from another kingdom. And I was fighting somebody, skipped a shot off the bottom of their shield and hit him in the knee. And this person came unglued, like grabbed me and screamed at me I should lose my authorization. And this kind of gets back to the kind of the middleman wannabe, that we talked about at the beginning. He was screaming at me until one of my grand squires came up to me and said, "Your Grace, can I take your sword and shield?" And the very second he heard the words "Your Grace," his entire demeanor changed. He was suddenly very, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were a Duke." And I'm like, too late. It's like, you show me your true colors. I would have respected you more if you kept up. But nothing crushes somebody's soul in this group and drives them away quicker than somebody losing their temper on them or beating them up, needlessly. So I mean, that's what I would say on this.
So we're gonna hit the next topic on this, which is valuing natural talent, or devaluing fighters who don't have natural talent. But one of the things I wanted to kind of throw in here, kind of halfway through the subjects that we have, is it's important to understand too that, we're talking about this in terms of how these things happen to people. It is important to point out the fact that this could happen to you, and by that I mean you could be the perpetrator and not know it, and you could put yourself in a position where, so social engineering being what it is, there's always the possibility that you could have done this to somebody in your career, And so when we're talking about some of these things and some of these examples of how we mistreat people at practice or in tournament or whatnot, a little bit of introspection and a little bit of self-reflection is probably due in understanding how easily it can be you, and being open to the possibility that maybe you said something and it was taken in a way that you hadn't intended, right? And so that's again part of that communication and being open. And we all need to be more open to having people talk to us about possibly having been the perpetrator in these circumstances. So just a quick thought on that to kind of keep in mind as we're talking about all these things. There's two sides to every story, and it could be you. So keep that up. So the next thing we're talking about is the idea of valuing only natural talent, where there's basically two different tracks for fighters. One for fighters who have perceived natural talent and who get more training and what have you, as opposed to those fighters that don't come to us with an athletic ability. And I know, Val, you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, so a lot of people, a lot of peers can be guilty of trying to create this farm of fighters around them that are exceptionally motivated, maybe physically gifted in some way or another. They see that potential for the individual to advance in prowess, and they find that to be very attractive because that pushes their renown forward, or they perceive that. And it's very important to also look at the individuals. Now, there's nothing wrong with helping someone who is physically gifted achieve, but you also have to you have a responsibility as a peer to mentor them in all ways and make sure that they're well-rounded individuals. I think that's what I have on this side.
Well, and Bronos had made a comment in the comments on the Facebook feed here, kind of talking about one way to help stop some of that is to make sure that you have a good structured practice at your fighter practice, so that everybody has equal access to the fighting base and the fighting knowledge if they want to pursue that. The more structure you put into that, it kind of presents the idea that like everybody is welcome and that everybody has an opportunity to learn from all the different fighters of practice. So that's one of those things that we can do to help that. Let's see, we have anybody else had any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Eli?
Yeah. I have seen this before where some people come in with more athletic ability, what seems to be natural talent, and they're scooped up, and they are given these some opportunities. But I've also seen people whose rise was slower, but it was based on a foundation of technical learning, and they kept achieving and kept gaining physical prowess as they learned. Whereas sometimes the people who will come in with great ability rely on that ability and don't necessarily add training to that, particularly if somebody is seeing them as a vehicle for their own renown rather than focusing on their development and their career and their ability and their training. Good technical training added to physical ability is exceptional, but physical ability can be gained on top of a base of technical training as well, or at the same time. So I think I think we're saying it's a mistake to assume where somebody can go based on where they start. It'll be easier for some people and more difficult for others, but I agree with the idea that structuring a practice so that training is available to everyone, then it's on it's the desire, and the ability of the person to learn, and their interest and their persistence, their perseverance, that it helps them. It's not the opportunities that are open for them that others are denied.
Ronald?
Yeah. On this subject, unlike a lot of other people who are dukes, I didn't start off with really any talent at all physically. I was 14 when I first started fighting in tournaments, and that's something that I noticed a lot. Was there was, as we said, two tracks of fighters. There was the fighter who had natural speed, strength, whatever ability to, and they tended to get, kind of the more attention, and at the time I didn't think much of it. Looking back, it was quite it's quite strange looking back with 40 plus years of involvement in this group to think of that. But and I only really thought of that lately. Is that as peers, it's our duty to advance our art, and not just advance our art to those who are fast or strong, but to anybody who's willing to listen to us. A way that I found to get to help the fighters with lesser natural ability along is that one of the drills we do is we have a bear pit situation, but you basically stay until you win one, or until you go through everybody. That way, those who aren't as skilled as the other ones get more fighting in, get more fighting with different people. They get to fight everybody at the practice. I've always found when somebody talks about how they'll only work with somebody they feel has the ability to get to advance to knighthood or whatever, I always found that to be just a real lazy way to go about it. Our goal is to advance this art for everybody, not just for those that we perceive of having talent. I mean, in my case, I didn't win a tournament fight for the first 2 years I fought. I would, there's a number of people I went to for training, and they were like, "Nah, I don't want to waste my time on you," and that's really kind of sad. But it is a problem, and find somebody that will work with you if somebody turns you down. We're out there. I mean, I got to give a lot of credit to Paul Bellatrix. He had infinite patience with me when I was 13, 14 years old. I mean, he worked with me every week, and he must have just had the patience of Job in that regard. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, first off, I want to say there's no real metric for anyone to get knighted or to receive a peerage, guys. So this timeline idea that is, you see like the natural is going to get, faster, or they're more valuable because they achieved it faster. That's not real. So every single person is going to have a different metric to get to there. So it's a unique path for each individual person. And each person comes with a toolbox that they start their career with. So the tools are, maybe you did sports or football or jujitsu, or you're tall or whatever. But I have seen people achieve where I thought they had no tools in their toolbox. And they sit in Knights Council with me now. And one of my most respected knights is a person like this that I look to and go, that guy handles shit on the war field. He's a great tournament fighter, full of achievement, and a good leader to his people. But I would have never thought that person would be sitting there. Okay. So there is a path for everyone, and each path is different, and some take longer and some don't. That's just the way of that. But remember, like what Ronald Wilmot was saying was that if you're a peer, and the SCA has given all of us so much, we have to give back. If we don't give back, if we don't share the information that we have, and I've been fighting for 30 years. If I don't, that's a lot of information stored in here. If I don't give that back to the society, what a loss, what a failure on my part. So I do feel obligated to make sure that I do reach out to those new fighters. And not everyone's going to be a knight. That's not what we're doing. If you're enjoying combat and you're having a good time and you are personally achieving things that make you feel valued, that's enough, right? And so, in my opinion, that's what I owe back to society. So when I go to practice, I work with every fighter that wants to work with me. Okay, so thanks, and I'll pass it on to someone else.
Sorry, still working with the mute. I think that the question that was asked is, what should unbelts do if there's an abusive or problematic SHIV member regularly attending their practice? Again, you know, that's a situation where you can create some social jeopardy for yourself as an unbelt. So you might want to address that with a member of the chivalry or respected peer that you have in high regard, or a good conversational relationship with, and maybe have them help address that situation, or look to the other chivalry at that practice, or whoever the Knights Marshal running that practice is, to address that problem. If you don't feel like you can address it yourself, you can address things with a person that is your superior, and avoid situations of social jeopardy by being polite. Being polite costs nothing. Even if you're upset in the situation, if you're able to keep calm and ask questions that allow the person that you have the issue with to explain themselves, you have a better chance of reaching a common ground. Even if you still disagree, at least you'll know better where that individual is coming from. And it also gives them the opportunity to be introspective and maybe find out that they are causing a problem that they weren't even aware of. So to wrap that back up, tell somebody you trust, be honest, be polite, be straightforward, and use the systems that are in place to get the situation taken care of, or at least addressed.
Yeah, I mean, hey, nice. So yeah, and kind of going back to the talent versus the idea of natural talent. Training trumps talent all the time. We talk about this on the show all the time. Proper training will overcome raw skill every single time. And me and Ronald and Val all started in our teenage years. I know Thorfinn had a little bit of jujitsu before he came to us, but you were like early 20s. You were a teenager when you started.
20.
Yeah, and Eli was early 20s at best when he got started.
I was actually mid-20s, and my previous athletic endeavors were fencing, bicycle racing, and dancing.
Yeah,
but they served me well.
Yeah, so Eli was the late bloomer among us.
Eventually had good training from a number of people who taught. Eventually had good training from a number of people, but I am shorter than average, and but learned how to maximize my advantages. So there you go. I don't think anybody thought I would do well when I started.
Yeah, I mean, all of us on this panel were not exceptionally gifted athletes. We just loved it from the first sight of it and worked our asses off to get better at it. But there was we don't have extensive sports backgrounds. And yeah, there is. I kind of agree with Ronald. I don't think there is such a thing as natural talent. There's as Duke Uther of the West, currently Crown of the West, once mentioned. I wasn't a talented, or I wasn't a gifted athlete. I was a gifted driver. I would naturally, get my ass in the car and drive to wherever the fighting is, that sort of stuff. I mean, there's a natural draw to our sport, but I don't think there's really a natural talent. I mean, this is so unlike anything else you've done, except for maybe boxing. If you're a Golden Gloves boxer, you might be able to come into this and transition pretty easy. But this is so unlike anything else that any other sport you've done, that there are some commonalities that you can apply to it, but you got to learn this from the ground up anyway. So anyway, just a couple of thoughts on that. So one of the other topics kind of along those lines, there's the overvaluing natural talent, but then there's the devaluing other fighters' achievements. When a fighter beats somebody who they thought they were better than, you get this, oh, well, the only reason you won was because of this sort of thing. So Ronald, you got some thoughts on that?
I do. This is something that I experienced a lot when I was younger. As I didn't start off with being very successful, when I started becoming successful, there were always people around that were going, well, like the first time I beat somebody in a tournament, I beat a knight in Crown tournament, first round, got a lucky shot in, to me when I was 16, and one-shotted him. And I was euphoric. That was the first time I won a tournament fight. I one-shotted a knight. Wow, look at me. As soon as I walked off the field, I had several people go, well, he's out of practice. Yeah, he just wasn't quite ready yet. And it was like, it wasn't anything I did. It was, the fact that this other guy had all these things going against him. I'm like, and as I like to say, there's nothing that'll put a chip on your shoulder quicker than having your moment ruined. And I've seen this happen, and we've all done it. It's like, especially if somebody comes off the field going, "Oh, look at me! I just want to fight." About like, if somebody seems a little cocky about it, you want to bring them down a little bit. And over the years, I've learned that let them have their moment. Just let them revel in the momentary. I beat this person, I won this tournament, etc. And just because that'll inspire them to try harder. Whereas if you just go, well, you only did this because so and so had a cold, or so and so hasn't been fighting much lately, then then they start getting an attitude and getting embittered, because they're like, well, I mean, I have another example that happened to me when I was up and coming, where I beat somebody that the Knights were looking at real heavily, and I beat him in Crown. I beat him handily. And as I was walking on the field, I heard one of the Knights say, well, Ronnie beat him. He's not ready. And I was like, wow, seriously? So, I mean, I'm a person that is inspired, by, proving people wrong. So that just fueled me to practice harder and work harder and prove them wrong. But not everybody's like that. A lot of people are like, well, if my achievements are being scoffed at, then why am I bothering? I mean, it's like, but I love this sport so much. I'm like, I'm going to try harder. I'm going to practice harder. I'm going to prove them wrong. And to any of the things we talked about tonight, that ultimately is the best revenge on any of these people, is to do better than them. A lot of the people I had problems with when I was a teenager, I looked at them from a throne a few years later, and they were still squires. They were still, whatever they were when they were being the way they were still at that level. So, the best way to deal with this is just be successful. So, and on to, I guess,
we got Val next.
One thing I like to do is in a situation, especially if it's a situation where consorts are on the field with their fighter, if I'm bested, regardless if I'm bested by the best Duke in the land or the newest unbelted fighter, if they won the fight, I acknowledge that I was bested, that they fought honorably, And I thank their consort for being their inspiration. And I thank the fighter for giving me the gift of the combat. And I think if you keep that in perspective, you can really affect that fighter, that fighter's experience, and all of us should be ambassadors of the fighting community's fun, and keep that in mind.
Yeah. Okay. So about this kind of idea of devaluing people's achievements, I know a knight who was doing this very regularly to an unbelted fighter, and he would always say basically the same thing. He would say, like, we were fighting, and then it seemed like he just hit me randomly. And then one day, after hearing him say this over and over again to kind of bolster his loss, right? I finally said, do you realize that he hits you with the same shot every time? I don't think it's random at all. And that guy was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he was really kind of taken aback. And I'm like, yeah, I think that guy knows exactly what he's doing. And so this is kind of a way, it's what it is. I find it to be a failure of pride, where people's pride are being pushed. And this is a failure of, one of the great knightly virtues, right? And so we should like look to this. If you start to feel yourself doing this, maybe roll it back for a minute and be okay with the idea of your failure is that, that guy's achievement is equally valuable, and don't take away from that. And so that was the only real thing I took out of that, was that I've seen it, and it is frustrating, and I bet all of us have done it at least once, right? But it's something that we should all look to, and remember to look to yourself and say, like, hey, it's okay that people are achieving. And so that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I would add to that it's not only the excess of pride, it's the absence of veritas, the virtue, truthfulness. Because if you're not being honest with yourself about yourself and about what happens, you cannot progress, you cannot learn. So if you find yourself in a situation where you've lost and you didn't expect to, learn from that. And if you find yourself in a situation where someone else is trying to devalue what you have accomplished, consider what they're saying, but consider what you know to be true as well. So what is honest? Not everybody's opinion is as valuable as other people. Not everybody's opinion is really it's their opinion. If they aren't giving you valid reasons, they're just expressing an opinion. So be truthful, be honest. We've been talking about a lot of virtues here: veritas, courtesy, politeness, and patience, and these are really expressions of those. And you don't always have control over what other people do, but you have control over what you do and how you react to what other people do. And if you react, I'll reiterate what Valharic said, if you react with patience and with courtesy, then you're more likely to do well.
Yeah, and on those lines, all of us on the panel tonight have had our a measure of success. I think it's fair to say, and part of the reason that we do this, especially in the Coach's Corner, is having had the success that we've had. There was no greater feeling in the world than being able to help others achieve that success. So if you find yourself in that position where you're tempted to hold somebody back or devalue their achievements or whatnot, for whatever sense to make yourself feel better, if you can help somebody become a better fighter, and you can help them go on to greatness that perhaps you haven't achieved for yourself, and maybe you never would achieve for yourself, just being part of that is pretty special. I mean, it's why we do what we do now, is being able to give this experience to as many people as possible. and right, to Thorfinn's point earlier, about when you get hit with something, I say that there are a few things that I love more than having a student hit me with one of my own shots. And getting the fact that they picked up something that I taught them and they learned it, and they were able to execute it on me. Of course, the best part of that is when they hit me with it and I tell them it's good, and they say, "Oh, I learned that from you." But yeah, I know where you got it from, and now I'm going to show you how to throw it right. Um, but yeah, there's few things I love more than somebody hitting me with my own shit. And we should be celebrating even the small achievements. And I think that's kind of the solution to this sort of thing, is as we get better as fighters. And of course, it's harder to do at the mid-range fighting level where you're trying to make a name for yourself. But you're gonna have to let go of that, and just realize that we should be celebrating the accomplishments of everybody rather than taking away from those accomplishments to make ourselves feel better. So the next topic that we have here, which kind of goes to kind of summarizes a lot of what we were talking about, is the social jeopardy and some of the solutions, and how to advocate for yourself, and how to talk to the marshals. And we've kind of touched around this a little bit, but let's have Valharic kick us off there.
Like I said, some of this is going to be review, but first of all, never go into a situation where you're overly emotional. If you need a second, take the time you need to be cool-headed so that you don't say something rash that you're going to regret. And I guarantee if you go into a situation hot-headed, you're going to say something rash that you're going to regret. The other thing is, make sure that you're clear on what your issue is, and that it is an actual issue. Make sure you're educated and have the understanding. Make sure you're polite. Make sure you open the discourse as a question, not as an accusation. Make sure you open a good line of communication with the person. Make sure that you're communicating effectively. And again, if you're in a situation where you can only lose honor, back out. It might come to, it's not going to be resolved at that point, and you don't need to force that. You need to approach things from a different avenue to get a better outcome. And there is nothing so time imperative that it's worth sacrificing your honor. And I think that there are some other fantastic gentlemen here who can add to this, and I want to give them that opportunity.
Ronald, do you want to go ahead and follow up on that?
I always hate following Valharic because he speaks so well, and I don't. I'm pretty much what Valharic said. I always tell the people that I train that, it's like, if you have to walk away from a situation for a minute and gather your thoughts, then do it. Don't say something you're going to regret. Don't say something that's going to follow you, for the rest of your career. But I mean, yeah, Valharic pretty much said it, better than I could. So I will let you go on to the next.
All right, Thorfinn.
Yeah, I just have a little bit here. So what we're talking about is failure of communication, and I think that part of it's systemic in at least my kingdom anyway. And I've seen a lot of this as I travel, but I could say specifically to my kingdom is what we did was we made this concept of talking to each other and having it be just an open line of communication, only combative. It was only accusatory. Right. And originally, I think that the idea started out to be that we should be doing this. We should talk to each other about, hey, what'd you feel about that leg blow or whatever. And then the other person can say, you know what, it just didn't really have it on it. And you're like, okay, right? But what ended up happening was it only became a thing where you brought that up when, as if you were to say, why did you not take that leg blow, right? And so it was calling their honor onto the into trial. And I feel that is a failure across the board. What we should have done is we should work towards this, is to make this an open line of communication all the time. That it's not a big deal to talk about these things. And then it steals all of the negative away from it, right? It's not just only accusatory, it's communicative. It's as two people, as His Grace Eliahu said, we're just having a conversation, right? And so this conversation has two sides, and sometimes you need to address that. And so I feel that if we could just take the stigma away from talking to each other about these things, it'll make so many issues kind of easier to address. But anyway, I think that's something that I feel that I'm going to try and push forward, and I would love to see more people do, is try and make this a happy, open line of communication, and have it just be kind of just, like you're talking about nothing, right? Like talking about just the weather. Hey, what'd you feel about that? And the guy says, and then no big deal. All right, because it shouldn't be a big deal, guys. This is not, none of this is big deal stuff. All right, thanks. I appreciate you guys.
So in line with that, one of the things that I do very much as we have people do during an authorization, the person authorizing, I want to hear them say it was light, it was good, it wasn't. I want to hear what they're saying at everything. And so I make a point of, when I'm fighting someone, if there's any kind of contact, I say blocked, light, off target, to just keep up that conversation so that they don't have to ask what I thought of it, because I'm already telling them, I'm already offering that. Now maybe that's going a little overboard from what is necessary, but it's trying to normalize. I'm trying to normalize the communication, very much as Thorfinn said. I'm trying to normalize that so it's no big deal. From the other point of view, when I'm marshaling, if I see something, because as a marshal, what I'm trying to do is keep that conversation going. And when it's not happening, there's a lack of communication or miscommunication, I'm trying to encourage that. So I will go to a fighter who threw a blow, and I'll ask them what they thought of what they threw. And if they say it was no good, then the conversation, it's over. And I will turn to the populace, the spectators, and explain to them what happened. Because the conversation, there are a lot of participants in what we do. There are the fighters, there's the marshal, there are the consorts, there are the spectators, there's the crown, there are the peerages, there's a lot of people involved in this conversation. So I do what I can to keep everybody informed. And I refer to this, I've explained this to some people, I call it informative marshaling, because I'm informing the fighters, I'm making sure they're informing each other, I'm informing the populace, and to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. Because the worst thing is when two people aren't talking and they're making assumptions about what's going on. Oh, he didn't take that, I'm gonna, crank it up, turn up the dial to 11, and then the other guys, why did he hit me so hard, or hit my shield so hard, or he didn't, what's going on? And so the idea is to prevent that with a conversation. There are other mechanisms when the conversation breaks down, but that requires, again, patience, courtesy, truthfulness, all the virtues. The virtues are generally, exercise of the virtues, and multiples of them simultaneously are generally the start of a solution to a lack of communication.
So since we're all kind of caretakers of our fighting culture, One thing I started doing that I feel might be valuable is addressing how to deal with a problem in a fighter's authorization. And it's just a brief conversation, but at least they know at the beginning of their fighting career how to interact with the marshals. If they see something, how to address the problem, how to make sure that they handle themselves and they know that these things could happen. Because I see a lot of fighters go through an authorization and they don't know what has happened. They don't understand what the interaction with the marshal is. And I think that that's a failure on our part as a culture in not preparing them for that kind of thing. And I think that there's a real opportunity there.
Yeah, so before we move on to the next topic, we actually got a couple of questions coming through here, but I also wanted to mention something that, or follow up on what Eli was saying. You know, there's this, you know, there's this whole litany of people that we need to be concerned about, and you know, I also wanted to recognize a comment that came up in the thread here from my very good friend, Mistress Tulia, who is no relation to Thorfinn. Your consort.
What? No, I know who she is.
Oh, you know that chick. Yeah, we need to take into consideration how your performance looks for your consort, because you are out there representing them, and when you are doing shitty things to advance yourself in your list, there are a number of factors that Eli had mentioned. You know, there's the crown, there's the opponent, there's the populace, the people that are watching what we do. You know, we like to say that it's not a spectator sport, right? But it is performance art of a sort, and 90% of the people that are attending an event to be at an event have nothing to do with the list, and we have an obligation to provide them a show, if you will, or you know, because as we mentioned earlier, there's the, you know, the system we have is a self-calibrating system that relies on all of us to trust each other and to know that we're all playing the game the same way, and part of that is making sure that the populace understands what we do, because most of the populace, they don't know what we do. They don't understand why we call the blows the way that we do, and we have an obligation to them to you know, to make sure that they can maintain their trust in the system that we have created for ourselves. And how that looks for your consort is pretty huge, and it was mentioned in the comments, so I definitely wanted to bring that up, that of all of these things that are out there, your advancement in the list is very low on the list of priorities that you should be thinking about as you go. And I mean, even among, you know, whether or not you're doing a disservice to your opponent, you're doing a disservice to your consort and to the crown and to the populace at large. So I just wanted to throw that out there when we're thinking about it. So one of the things that one of the last topics that we have on that, actually there was a question that I think I wanted to get to. Just give me a second here. So how does the panel feel about the dichotomy between sport armor or fast minimum armor versus going for whole hog rig? And I assume this means having better armor to I don't know, so that you can advance in the list, so maybe you don't feel some shots. Or do you have any thoughts on that sort of thing? Go ahead, Thorfinn.
Okay, so I'm going to try and figure out how I feel about what they're calling sport armor versus the whole hog. I think sport armor is, they're probably talking about things like using plastic and things to kind of lighten your kit and things like that to make you successful, versus the whole hog rig, which my interpretation is that they're saying it's the wearing like a absolutely historical rig, right? I have mad respect for someone who wears like head to toe mail with a globus breastplate and all those things like that, and their bassinet with the horsehair padding and everything. I do, and I've seen great success in that as well. I think that's something we should all be trying to achieve, is some kind of something close to your time period, right? There has to be some kind of concessions for what we do. We all have to go to work on Monday. We all have, we got to make sure our fingers are safe so we can all type on our, computers and things like that, or pour cocktails if you're me or whatever. But I think that there's a space for both. And my kit is kind of actually halfway between both. I definitely have some parts that I think are maybe modern, but also I definitely have like, Kerbali armor for my legs, and things like that. And so there is a way to do both, and I think that they're both excellently acceptable. So I don't think anyone here is going to argue about those things. So I'm just going to let it ride there. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I wear very, very minimal armor, and I never did it because of a sport thing. I did it as a persona thing. I mean, I needed to compact my armor so that it could be worn the appearance of somebody wearing a steel cap, essentially, because that was what was period for me. I think somebody who goes out of their way to fight in their persona is inspiring and excellent, like Thorfinn said. I think somebody who is wearing the minimal amount of armor is taking the maximum amount of risk, and there's some payoff there as well. If you're wearing lots of armor because you don't like to get hit, well, you might be in the wrong sport. That's what I got.
So I've never worn just minimal armor. But I've always worn enough so that I could not be or hurt excessively. So I could, as Thorfinn said, go back to work. So I've made concessions to for weight. I think I'm sure my armor has gotten lighter, but also more accurate as time has gone on. We now have access to armor that is more accurate and lighter and better fitting than when I started with my first set of scrounged material coat of 16 gauge overlapping plates, because I found some 16 gauge steel and it weighed a ton, and I had carpet, and we have so much, it's so much better, that moves so much better. There's some people who do minimal armor. I have a variety of suits, suite of armor, depending on the situation, depending on what I'm doing. Not for competitive value, but for the context. Is this very historical, like Combat of the 30? Is it a tournament? Sure, I'll go with what, but it's always has to look right. I don't think that weight, purely reducing the weight, has as much of an advantage as some people think it is. I think it's another case of looking for the secret weapon, the special sword, the special equipment, that gives somebody presumably an advantage. I think the real advantage is in practice and technique and diligence and perseverance, and knowledge and gaining an ability. I've seen great people fight in um, in armor that would have been considered perhaps more cumbersome to other people, and people wearing very little armor who couldn't fight very well, and vice versa. So I as long as it passes the 10-foot rule, as it looks, period, it enhances what we're doing, I think it's fine. And I don't think it conveys a particular advantage.
Yeah, as Bronos just mentioned in the comments there, Eli totally nailed it right there. I think all of us would agree that the thing that gives us an advantage over our opponents is the 30 plus years that we've put into practicing our sport. I have my suit of armor is largely what you can't see is largely sport armor, lacrosse gear, that sort of stuff. I don't do that so that I can have a competitive advantage. I do that so that I can have, so that I can fit it all in one bag. So when I go fly to teach somebody, to teach a class somewhere, I can, I do it for travel considerations more than anything. Not a competitive advantage. Again, I mean, working your ass off is the biggest competitive advantage you can give yourself. So the last little bit we're going to talk about here is the fact that even though it may not be as transparent as some would like, we are getting better about addressing these things, and people have been sanctioned for this kind of behavior as it gets involved. His Grace Valharic was on the board of directors for a while. Eli was on the board as well for a bit. We're going to have Eli kick us off on this on some of the stuff that really is happening, even if you can't see it.
Thanks. So it used to be that the tools that we had as a society were limited. They went from either nothing to a hammer, a big hammer. There are much more, there's a wider range of tools, of sanctions, of corrective measures that can be addressed, that can be applied, and they are being applied. Is it where it should be? No, but it's making progress. There's progress. But people don't necessarily see that. And that's a big issue. People wanting to see that justice is being done, needing to see it. So if somebody is actually dangerous or is endangering them, there's a concept that's been talked about at the society level off and on for years about service to the membership, a membership value to and protecting the membership, that is the participants and paid members, and removing the missing stair, that concept of missing stair, the person who's being told, hey, just avoid that person. Well, that person should be addressed, that they should be addressed, and they are being addressed. There's a lot more happening now. And there are a lot more tools now that at the society level, at the kingdom level, at the local level, there are a lot more tools, and there are better procedures in place for addressing those than there have been. And I think with that, I'll hand it off to Valharic.
I think Eli addressed the point fairly well. One thing I will say is that across the board, the society and the world is changing, and we all have to change with it, and we have to be responsible, and we have to make sure that we are holding people responsible for bad actions, whether they are peers, whether they are royal peers, whether they are brand new. We have the responsibility to protect this society for each other. And that's a huge responsibility, and one that I take very seriously. And I think all these gentlemen do. And we need to do this through communication and understanding. And we need to be even and just, so that when people look at this group from the outside, they see the face of an organization that truly does rise to the values that we espouse.
Yeah, I think overall when we're talking about repercussions and whatnot, and the theme of the night has definitely been communication. If we can have a slightly uncomfortable conversation at the beginning of a confrontation or a conflict, it will, in many cases, avoid a much harsher conversation later, and may avoid people being removed from the society for shitty behavior. So always take advantage of the opportunity to have that conversation, and above all, I think we all need to work harder to normalize that conversation without it being a pejorative. As has been mentioned several times tonight, let's stop assuming that somebody is calling you a cheater when they ask what happened to a thing, and normalize that conversation. And again, as we mentioned earlier, understand that you could be the problem, and be open to that. This society is one of the most forgiving organizations that I've ever been part of, or witnessed. And when you recognize your shortcomings and you make steps to correct those things, you'd be surprised at how forgiving people can be. And you can be a better part of this society by making adjustments to your behavior. And again, Ronald and I were teenagers when we started, and there was no shortage of shitty things that I said in my teen years, that I have benefited greatly from people giving me the opportunity to learn and grow. And I think that can happen at any age, given the opportunity. So we're at the top of the hour here, so we just wanted to wrap up real quick. I'm going to turn this over to Ronald for some final thoughts on the topic tonight.
I'm glad that this subject has been brought up in this forum. It's something I've wanted to see brought up in some way for a long time. This is, the vast majority of SCA people want to see you advance. What we're talking about tonight are the outliers. I believe that, that as knights and dukes, that our goal is to replace ourselves and to forward the art. Sadly, there are a lot of people out there, for whatever reason, ego, self-aggrandizement, bitterness, whatever, don't believe that. But kind of what I want the people watching this to take away from this is that if there's a problem person out there, or a problem situation, there is a way out of it. We're here to help you. This is one of the most fun sports you can possibly do. I've been doing it for 43 years. It's like most of my friends are involved in it, so, but that's pretty much what I have.
Everybody that I love is in this society. And I will do my part to make it the best society that I can for all of them. And I think that everybody here is invested in that same way. And again, through looking to the virtues to be our guides, I think we can accomplish a lot. And I was really, really proud to be part of this panel. It was really nice to be able to share so many common thoughts with so many people from this society, from across the whole known world. It kind of shows that we are coming together, and we are taking responsibility and taking action in the right direction. Thanks very much. Good night.
Hey, Thorfinn, you got a thought there? Oh, you're muted. Every time.
Fuck, man. No, I just want to say, what a great show. Good night to everybody. And we'll try to get to those questions if you post them in the chat. All right, guys. Good night.
So yeah, as always, I would like to thank everybody for joining us. Ronald and Valharic, especially, thanks for being our special guests. We really, really appreciate you guys having providing your input on this. Thanks everybody for the comments and the questions in the Facebook feed there. You know, we try to talk about some of these difficult topics sometimes, because you know it's not all rainbows and butterflies and teaching people a flat snap. These are parts of the society that come up, and we as trainers and excellent fighters in our sport, we kind of feel like we have an obligation to have this conversation. So we definitely appreciate everybody tuning in to be part of that. My thanks as always to Eli and his Grace Thorfinn. And if she'll turn on her mic there, we can give our proper appreciations to our host and producer, Vesper, as always.
Thanks.
Without whom this whole operation falls apart. So thank you as always for keeping us on track and getting us the questions and spotlighting everybody. So we really appreciate everything you do. And you know, it's been going on a year now, and you've been a real trooper. So as always, we thank you for what you do.
I just thank you guys for like contributing. It's amazing what you do for the society. So thank you for taking the time. You know, even though this is kind of the pandemic, I feel like we have less time than before the pandemic. I don't know how that happened, but
Yeah.
Thank you all for doing that. Sean, do you want to tell us what's coming up next week?
Yeah, so coming up, we got a couple of things. So this coming Monday, we are doing a video review, doing some more video analysis. Myself and Thorfinn and Helga, as always, and we've got a special guest that's going to be joining us on Monday night as well. So tune in for that. We've got a couple of folks from the East Kingdom and from Callantir that we're going to be going over some stuff there. So that's Monday night, and then next Friday we have you know, making progress when you can't fight. So during these during the Rona years that we're all dealing with, how is your mental state for making progress? For that one, we're going to have Duke Mark Arendelle from the East Kingdom, who's, you know, our in resident Zen master, Buddhist master.
West Kingdom.
What did I say?
East.
I said East. Oh, yeah, you know, the other side. Yeah. So yeah, West Kingdom for sure. And I think Eli's going to be part of that, and I think we're going to have Viscount Sagan back to be part of that conversation as well. So yeah, finding some mindfulness and finding some good focus and some ways to prepare yourself mentally for coming out of the virus and the pandemic years. So we got that coming up next week. So a couple good episodes coming up. Thanks as always to our guests and our coaches. Really appreciate it, Vesper, and everybody tuning in. As always, you guys are the one that makes this worth doing every week. So we really appreciate it. So everybody have a good night.
Keep rocking on your heart.